I never imagined that a routine visit from a police officer would turn into something so intense. When he showed up at my door, I thought it was just another standard call. But what happened next completely caught me off guard. His presence left me breathless, and in that moment, everything changed. Let me take you back to where it all began. I've never been someone who craved attention, especially not from strangers. My life moved in slow, predictable rhythms. My job, my daily routine, and the quiet comfort of my apartment were all I thought I needed. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Most days I convinced myself I was content, but there were moments, quiet, fleeting ones, when something inside me stirred. A longing, maybe. A quiet ache for connection. I always pushed it away, brushing it off as nothing more than a passing thought. Then came the knock on my door. It was late in the afternoon when I heard it, a soft, deliberate tap that pulled me out of the fog I'd been living in. I wasn't expecting anyone, which made it all the more unsettling. I glanced at the clock. 4:30 p.m., no deliveries, no visitors, no family, no friends. With a sigh, I pulled myself up from the couch and walked toward the door, expecting some minor inconvenience. But I wasn't prepared for him. Officer Miller stood on the other side. His uniform was crisp, his badge catching the dim light of the hallway. At first glance, he looked like any other officer, tall, composed, with that practiced seriousness in his eyes. But there was something different about him. Something I couldn't quite define. His gaze met mine, steady, focused, yet unexpectedly gentle, and I felt a warmth rise in my chest. "Good afternoon, sir," he said. His voice was calm, smooth, carrying a quiet authority that immediately drew my attention. "I'm Officer Miller. We received a complaint about some noise from this unit. I just need to check on a few things, if that's all right." There was nothing threatening about him, yet his presence filled the space between us with an energy I couldn't name, a quiet confidence that made the air feel heavier, charged somehow. I nodded and stepped aside. "Of course. Come in," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. As he stepped inside, I couldn't help but notice how perfectly the uniform suited him, not in an obvious way, but in the way his shoulders filled the fabric, the quiet sound of his boots against the hardwood floor. He moved with precision, like someone completely in control of his surroundings. And in that moment, I realized how much of a stranger he truly was, a stranger who made me feel uneasy in a way I couldn't quite explain. "Mind if I take a look around?" he asked, his gaze sweeping across the room. "No. Go ahead," I replied quickly, maybe too quickly, trying to hide the strange tension building inside me. I watched as he moved through the space, each step calm and deliberate, his focus sharp. He asked a few routine questions about the neighbors and checked the windows, just doing his job. But there was something about the way he carried himself, the quiet authority in his movements, that made the air feel different. I found myself watching him, drawn to the quiet intensity he seemed to carry so effortlessly. I tried to look away, but my eyes kept finding him again. The visit didn't last long. A quick check, a few notes, nothing more. But his presence lingered. His eyes met mine again as he asked if I'd had any issues with noise. His voice lowered slightly when he said it, just enough to make the words feel heavier. It could have meant nothing, but somehow it didn't feel that way. He remained polite and professional the entire time, yet something beneath the surface felt charged, an undercurrent I couldn't quite name. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was overthinking it. Just a routine visit, nothing more. But as he turned to leave, he paused in the doorway, his eyes locking with mine one last time. "Thanks for your time," he said with a brief, tight smile. "If anything comes up, don't hesitate to reach out." Ordinary words, but the way he said them stayed with me. "Sure. Of course," I murmured, and the door clicked shut behind him. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the space where he had just been. A strange feeling twisted in the pit of my stomach, part confusion, part something I couldn't name. I shook my head, trying to brush it off. "It's just a cop," I told myself. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he looked at me, the quiet weight of his presence, the calm confidence he carried into my home, and how it lingered long after he left. Over the next few days, that feeling didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. I found myself replaying that brief encounter again and again, the moment our eyes met, the subtle shift in his voice, the quiet energy that filled the room. It was as if he'd left a part of himself behind. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't let it go. Maybe it was nothing more than a passing moment, a fleeting attraction. But somehow it didn't feel that way. The truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about him. And little did I know, I wasn't the only one. As the days passed, the memory of that afternoon stayed with me like a whisper I couldn't silence. I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that it had just been a routine visit, nothing more, nothing less. But the way Officer Miller had looked at me, the way his voice had softened, almost intimate, it kept echoing in my mind at the most unexpected times. I didn't think I'd ever see him again. So when the doorbell rang late one evening, sharp, urgent, I nearly dropped the glass I was holding. My stomach tightened. I froze, listening. The bell didn't ring again, but then came a knock, 3 quick, impatient raps. Something felt off. I opened the door, and there he was, Officer Miller. But not like before. His uniform was rumpled, his breathing uneven, and under the dim hallway light, I saw a thin streak of blood running from a scrape near his temple. One hand gripped the doorframe, just barely steadying himself. "Hey," he said, his voice low, rough around the edges. "Sorry for just showing up like this." For a moment, I could only stare, my mind scrambling to process what I was seeing. His usual calm was cracked, not gone, but shaken enough to make my pulse quicken. "What happened?" I asked, stepping aside without thinking. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said, exhaling slowly and shaking his head. "Some idiot broke into a house down the block. I was already in the area when the call came in. When I showed up, the guy ran, clipped me on his way out." He touched his temple briefly and let out a dry scoff. "Slippery bastard got away." I frowned, glancing down the hallway as if expecting to see some kind of chaos left behind. But everything was quiet. Just the soft hum of the hallway light and the faint sound of a TV coming from a nearby apartment. "Are you sure you're okay?" I asked again, this time more firmly. "Yeah," he said with a tired breath, running a hand down his face before meeting my eyes. There was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. "I just need a second, maybe a drink if you've got one." That caught me off guard. Before I could ask why, he shifted slightly, and that was all it took to see it. A subtle wobble, a small sway. He wasn't as fine as he wanted to seem. I didn't hesitate. "Come in," I said, stepping aside completely. He didn't argue. He walked past me with measured steps, still in control, but carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. As I closed the door, I caught the faint scent of sweat mixed with something sharper. Adrenaline, maybe. It lingered in the air around him. He sat at the dining table without waiting to be invited, leaning back and rubbing the side of his neck. I moved to the kitchen and filled a glass with water. "Sorry about the doorbell," he called over his shoulder, his voice softer now. "Didn't mean to make it sound like a damn emergency." "It's fine," I said, setting the glass in front of him. "I thought you were about to knock the whole door down." That earned me a faint smirk. He shook his head and took the glass, but instead of drinking right away, he just stared at it, his gaze distant. Then finally, he lifted it and drank deeply. I sat across from him quietly, watching the way his shoulders began to relax, the tension easing with every swallow. The scrape on his temple still looked raw, the skin red and irritated. "You should clean that," I said. He lifted a hand, grazing the wound lightly with his fingertips before pulling away. "It's nothing. I've had worse." "That doesn't mean you should walk around with dried blood on your face," I replied, maybe a little too bluntly. Without waiting for a response, I went to the bathroom and ran a washcloth under warm water. When I came back, he looked up, something flickering in his eyes. But he didn't resist when I handed him the cloth. He pressed it gently to the cut, wincing slightly. You a medic or something? He muttered. I huffed. Nope, just not an idiot. That made him smirk again, but this time it carried something else. Amusement, maybe, or something deeper. He leaned back in the chair and let out a slow, tired breath. You ever have one of those nights where everything feels like it's moving too fast, but somehow dragging at the same time? I frowned. Yeah? I guess that's what this feels like, he said quietly, shaking his head. 1 second I'm chasing someone down. The next, I'm here. His fingers tapped softly against the glass. Then he looked at me again. And I don't even know why I came to your door. There was something in the way he said it, something that sent a ripple through me. It wasn't just the words. It was the way his voice dropped at the end, the way his gaze lingered on mine a little longer than it should have. He didn't say it like an apology. He said it like a realization. I swallowed. Maybe you just needed somewhere to catch your breath. He didn't. Look away. He nodded slowly. Maybe. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but it was heavy with something unspoken. A quiet tension stretched between us like a thread pulled tight but never breaking. He set the empty glass down, his fingers tapping once against the table. Then he stood. I should go, he said, but didn't move right away. Thanks for the water. I nodded and stood too, but neither of us stepped toward the door. His eyes flicked over me briefly before he exhaled and rolled his shoulders. Take care, all right? You too, I murmured. He hesitated for a heartbeat, then turned and walked to the door. I followed, watching as he opened it and stepped into the dim hallway. But just before he disappeared, he glanced back. If they catch the guy, he said, his voice lower now, as if the walls might be listening, I'll let you know. I nodded. Yeah, okay. And just like that, he was gone. I closed the door and stood there for a long while, my thoughts struggling to catch up. The air felt different now, like something had been left behind, even though he was no longer there. And somehow, I knew this wouldn't be the last time he came to my door, and I was right. What happened next changed everything. The days after Officer Miller's unexpected visit fell into a strange rhythm. I went through the motions, work, errands, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, but no matter how hard I tried to distract myself, my thoughts kept circling back to that night. Back to him, I told myself it was nothing. He'd been hurt, needed a moment to breathe, and I just happened to be the nearest open door. That's all it was. But the way he looked at me before he left, the subtle shift in his expression, kept tugging at me. I couldn't shake it. More than once, I caught myself glancing at the door, half expecting another knock. And every time I heard distant sirens, my pulse quickened. Not quite fear, not quite relief, just something in between. I hated how my body reacted to the mere thought of him. A week passed, and just as I'd convinced myself that whatever that moment was had been a fluke, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but somehow I already knew. Hello? Hey, it's Officer Miller. Just hearing his voice sent a jolt through me. I forced myself to sound neutral. Hey, what's up? I know this is kind of out of the blue, he said carefully, but I'm doing some paperwork at the precinct, and your name came up in a routine follow-up. Nothing serious. Just need a quick signature. Would you mind if I stopped by? I hesitated, not because I didn't want to see him. I did. And that was the problem. There was no reason for my chest to tighten or my pulse to jump over something as simple as paperwork. But before I could stop myself, I said, yeah, sure. What time? I'll be there in about half an hour. The call ended and I just stared at my phone, my thoughts churning. This was just work. Nothing more. And yet 30 minutes later, I was standing by the door, trying not to admit how much I was looking forward to seeing him again. When the knock finally came, it was softer than before, no urgency, no tension. Just two quiet, deliberate knocks, almost like he wasn't sure he should be there at all. I swallowed hard and opened the door. He was there, but something had changed. Still in uniform, but this time his expression wasn't guarded. His posture wasn't rigid. He looked softer, almost uncertain. For a moment, he just stood there looking at me like he wasn't entirely sure why he'd come. "Hey," he said quietly. I nodded and stepped aside. "Hey." He walked in and paused in the middle of the room, his eyes moving slowly over the space like he was really seeing it for the first time. Something about the air felt different, thicker, heavier. A quiet pause neither of us could name. I cleared my throat, needing to break the tension. "So, what's this about?" "Right," he said, blinking back into focus. He pulled a clipboard from under his arm. "Just need your signature. It's a follow-up on that noise complaint from last month." I raised an eyebrow. "You could have had me sign this at the precinct." A faint smirk tugged at his lips, but he quickly masked it. "Yeah, I guess I could have." I reached for the clipboard, and when he handed it to me, our fingers brushed, just barely. But that single touch sent a jolt up my arm, sharp, electric. James felt it too. I could tell. His breath caught, so subtle I might have missed it if I wasn't paying attention. He pulled his hand back quickly, clearing his throat. "Sorry," he muttered. "It's fine," I murmured, gripping the clipboard a little tighter. I focused on the form, signing where he'd marked. But I could feel his eyes on me, watching, lingering. It made my skin warm. When I handed it back, he hesitated just a beat before taking it. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the things we weren't saying. He shifted slightly, then sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I didn't want this to be weird," I frowned. "What do you mean?" His jaw tightened before his eyes found mine. "I don't know what it is about being here with you, but..." He trailed off, frustrated. "It feels like I shouldn't keep showing up, but it also feels like I shouldn't leave." My stomach tightened. I wasn't sure if it was nerves or something else entirely. "I shouldn't be here like this," he admitted, voice low. "But every time I walk away, it feels like I'm leaving something unfinished." His words hung between us, heavy and honest. I swallowed. "You're not the only one who feels that way." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, but also hesitation, like he hadn't expected me to say it out loud. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. We just stood there, inches apart, the air between us alive with something we couldn't name, and just when I thought he might close the distance, just when it felt like something was about to happen, he stepped back. "I should go," he murmured. I didn't stop. I didn't ask him to stay, even though part of me wanted to. He hesitated once more, then turned toward the door. But before leaving, he glanced back. "If they catch the guy," he said quietly, "I'll let you know," and then he was gone. I stood there long after the door closed, the silence thick with everything we hadn't said. I knew without a doubt this wasn't over. Not even close. What came next? I still don't have the words for. The quiet of the night wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator and the steady ticking of the wall clock. I'd been lying in bed for hours, but sleep wouldn't come. My thoughts were too loud, too restless, and every single one of them circled back to Officer Miller. I could still feel the energy from our last encounter, the tension in his voice, the uncertainty in his eyes. It hadn't just been duty that brought him back, and it definitely wasn't coincidence. But neither of us had said it aloud. We stayed trapped in that strange space between what we felt and what we could admit. I exhaled, pressing a hand to my face, as if that might quiet the storm inside me. I had just turned onto my side when a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. I froze. It was late, too late for visitors. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just something from the hallway. Knock, knock, louder this time. More urgent, my heart raced. I threw off the covers and padded to the door, pulse thundering in my ears. I barely hesitated before unlocking it and pulling it open. And there he was, Officer Miller. The crisp uniform was gone, replaced by something far less composed. His tie hung loose, sleeves rolled up, shirt slightly wrinkled, like he'd run his hands over his face too many times. But it was his expression that made my stomach tighten. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, dark and tense, told a different story. "What happened?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. His gaze flicked past me, scanning the apartment before locking back onto mine. "We got him," he said, voice low, almost breathless. "The guy who broke in earlier, he's in custody." I blinked. "Wait, you mean the one who tried to break into my neighbor's place?" "Yes." He nodded, his jaw tightening. "But there's more." He hesitated. "We think he wasn't working alone." The weight of his words sent a chill down my spine. Suddenly, I was too aware of everything. The stillness of the walls, the shadows in the corners, the quiet hum of the apartment. Just moments ago, I'd been lying there, completely unaware of whatever had been happening right outside my door. I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" James exhaled, running a hand through his hair like he was still piecing it together. "There are signs someone else was involved," he said. He had a burner phone on him, but we couldn't trace his last call. We don't know who he was working with, or if they're still out there. His eyes darkened as he studied me. "I don't want you to be alone tonight," my breath caught. I should have been focusing on the danger, the idea that someone might have been watching me, that this wasn't over. But all I could think about was how he said those words. The rough edge in his voice, the tension behind his concern. I stepped back slowly, and James followed, crossing the threshold before I could second-guess what I was doing. The door clicked shut behind him, and suddenly the air between us felt charged, smaller, heavier. "Are you sure they were after me?" I asked quietly, his lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know," he said, "but it doesn't sit right with me. The way that guy was searching, the way he reacted when we caught him, it wasn't random. Someone wanted something in this building." I swallowed, fear and something deeper twisting inside me. And what if whoever else was involved comes back? He met my eyes, his jaw tight. "That's why I'm here." The way he said it sent another shiver through me, but not from fear. There was a beat of silence. Then softer now, almost like he was talking to himself, he murmured, "I couldn't just leave without making sure you were okay." The way he looked at me, God, it was undoing me. There was something raw there, something unguarded, like he was standing at the edge of something dangerous and was finally too tired to step back. And somehow, I felt like I was standing there with him. My voice came out quieter than I intended. "You didn't have to come." His eyes flickered. His throat tightened. I did. Something in me cracked at those words. I didn't know why, but I felt it deep and real. Before I could stop myself, I reached out, my fingers brushing lightly against his wrist, and in that instant, I felt it. The pull. The kind that made every thought scatter, every wall I'd built start to crumble. James inhaled sharply, his body tensing at the touch. But he didn't move away. He could have. Maybe he should have. Instead, his hand shifted, his fingers brushing mine in return, steady, certain, like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than he cared to admit. "I don't know what this is," I said softly, my voice barely holding steady, "but I can't ignore it anymore." His gaze deepened, conflicted but unflinching. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us was alive, charged, thick with everything we hadn't said, and then he stepped closer. Not a sudden movement, just a quiet, certain one. The kind that made time slow down. His presence filled the space around me, warm and grounding. My pulse raced, but I didn't back away. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his voice roughened with restraint. "And I will." I didn't. We stood there, too close, too aware, breathing the same air. Every unspoken feeling, every stolen glance, every moment of tension had led us here. Nothing happened, and yet everything did. When he finally exhaled, his hand fell away slowly, like letting go of something fragile. He took a step back, the weight of what almost happened lingering between us like static. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence said enough. I could feel the tension in his muscles, the way he was holding himself together, barely. That quiet restraint only made the moment burn brighter inside me. When he pulled me closer, the world seemed to tilt. My heartbeat thundered in my chest, and every wall I had built around myself began to crumble. We stumbled back together, landing in a breathless, tangled mess, our laughter soft, our hands finding each other like they'd been waiting for this for a long time. There was nothing polished about it. It was raw, honest, real. All the things we'd been denying had finally spilled over, and for the first time in so long, I wasn't questioning it. I wasn't questioning us. When the storm finally quieted, we lay there side by side, tangled in silence. The night wrapped itself around us like a secret, and neither of us made a move to break it. I could feel the rise and fall of his chest against mine, the steady rhythm grounding me in a way I didn't know I needed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt peace. No confusion, no noise, just the quiet weight of something real. His voice finally broke the silence, soft and careful. "Are you okay?" I nodded, my fingers tracing lazy patterns against his skin, trying to memorize the shape of this moment. "Yeah," I whispered. "I think I am." But underneath the calm, something deeper stirred, a feeling I hadn't expected and wasn't sure how to name. "I wasn't expecting this," he admitted, his voice low, edged with uncertainty. "I thought I was just doing my job. I didn't think it would turn into this." I could hear the conflict woven through every word, the line between duty and something far more personal. He wasn't just the uniform anymore. He was James. And somewhere along the way, the boundary between who we were supposed to be and who we wanted to be had quietly disappeared. I turned to face him fully. The air between us was charged, full of everything we hadn't said. "I didn't expect it either," I whispered. "But now that it's happened, I don't want to pretend it didn't. I don't want to ignore it." I reached for his hand, threading my fingers through his. His grip tightened just enough to let me know. He felt it too. "I don't know where this is going or what it means," I said quietly, "but I want to figure it out. With you. I'm not running." He stared at me for a long moment, searching, like he was trying to find something hidden behind my words. Then he exhaled slowly, as if letting go of something he'd been carrying for far too long. "Neither am I," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But this time there was no hesitation. "Just us," he added after a beat. "I've been holding back for so long, but now I don't want to." When he leaned in again, his kiss wasn't desperate. It was gentle, deliberate. A quiet promise. This wasn't about attraction anymore. It was about connection, trust. Two people standing at the edge of something uncertain, finally brave enough to see where it might lead. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads rested together, our breaths mingling in the stillness. And in that silence, I felt everything, the weight of what had just happened, and the quiet wonder of what might come next. "I don't know what happens now," he murmured, voice rough, honest. "But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." I smiled, brushing my thumb across his knuckles. Neither am I. For that moment, nothing else mattered. Not tomorrow. Not the past. Just this. The way he held me. The way it finally felt like we were exactly where we were meant to be. The world outside faded. All that remained was the rhythm of his heartbeat against mine. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I still don't know what any of this means. Not completely. I don't know how it might change us or where it's going. But I know one thing for sure, I don't regret it. Not a single moment, and that's where my story ends. At least for now, but I can't help wondering, was this just fate? Or did we take a chance neither of us saw coming? Tell me what you think in the comments. And thank you for listening.